Welcome, everyone, to the March 26th edition of the Signals from Mars podcast, brought to you by the Mars Attacks. Wait, what did I say? Signals from Mars live stream, brought to you by the Mars Attacks podcast. We are joined today by the always eloquently dressed Joel Gausten. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Excellent.
Joel is someone that I've had on the show. I think this is the third time that I've had you on over the years. At least once or twice before. When I started doing the live stream, I started looking at people that I'd talked to in the past and said, I got to get Joel back on because, I follow you on social media and stuff. And I think that you're talking about interesting things. You're doing interesting stuff on your site as well. And, at the end of the day, I love doing the podcast. I love doing this live stream to help spread the word, to help get people to find out who Joel Gausten is. God forbid I have people on that get pissy with me and say, oh, what do you mean they don't know who I am? Well, yeah, there may be one or two people out there. So I love spreading the word.
Well, thank you. And first of all, it's nice to see you again. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the only, but I know the first time we chatted came up on my Facebook memories this week. It was exactly 10 years ago this week.
Oh, wow.
We did our first interview. So it's cool that we're doing this again.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've talked about so many things in the past, and obviously you're from New Jersey, like myself.
Yep.
We both no longer live in New Jersey. Although you were talking a little while ago that maybe there may be a move back to the area when you're done with New Hampshire, or you're not sure?
Well, everything went on pause, obviously, when COVID hit.
Yeah.
What had happened was I was living on this 4-acre farm up in New Hampshire for many years. My then wife and I had the property, and we split up and subsequently got divorced. And it took me forever to sell or get the place ready to go to market. And then once it get sold right away, which was awesome.
Oh, wow.
So I sold the house, got a new car, got a lot of things in order, and then a week later, COVID hit.
Oh, wow.
The place I'm living now is just a small apartment. I basically just moved here to put my stuff out of the rain for a bit.
Right.
I didn't plan to stay here very long at all. And then the pandemic happened, and here we are a year later. So, but to answer your question, the plan is not to go back to Jersey. It looks possibly like New York right now.
Okay.
That seems to be the stronger possibility.
Okay.
I'm seeing a great lady who lives in New York. So it
Gotcha.
kind of makes sense instead of doing the 3-hour one-way trip down there. Travel was much more exciting when I was 25.
Right. I hear you.
Gonna try to ease my time on the road for unnecessary things. Being behind the wheel of a car doesn't have much appeal to me right now if I can avoid it. So,
sure.
Yeah, it's like probably New York, but I still have a lot of ties to New Jersey. Obviously, my dearest friends are still there. So,
cool.
Try to get down there when I can.
Awesome. And about a year ago, you released your last book as well.
Yeah.
So right around the time that COVID happened, the 3 a.m. Girls and More came out. Luckily, you could purchase the book online so that you could have it sent to you. It's funny, a few weeks ago, I interviewed someone, and, I always bring up the fact that I hate when people throw up like softball questions or the asshole question of, so what's the reaction like? Because nobody's going to turn around and say, well, the fans have been saying it's dog shit, So a year later, do negative reactions to things that you put out stick in your mind, or is that something that you can put behind you? Because I remember years ago Madonna saying that positive reviews almost bounced off of her, but that one negative person in the room was the person that stuck with her. At this stage of the game, in the entertainment business, in your artistic life, do other people's comments even bother you?
Are you asking specifically for the 3 a.m. girls or just in general?
How about both?
Well, with the 3 a.m. girls, the only thing that I've received that could be considered a criticism is there were people who suggested I didn't go far enough.
Okay.
And if you read the book, my reaction is, what the fuck do you want? You want a 3D fucking photo album to go along with it,
Right.
Because in my view, it's the most, well, first of all, most personal book, but it's got a lot of elements to it. And I'm reading, I'm thinking, well, what else did you really want?
Mm-hmm.
I have a chapter in it called Weekend with a Porn Star, and it's fairly detailed. What more did you want?
Yeah.
So that was the only sort of negative thing. As far as negative stuff about other work I've done, I've always, because I review records and other media through my website.
Yeah.
And not everything I've written about has received a good review, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am of the mind that when you unleash something in the world, whether it be a book, an album, whatever, it doesn't really belong to you anymore. It belongs to the person who's receiving it.
Right.
And they can make any sort of assumption or conclusion they want.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really bother me. And kind of the model that I've learned to use in getting negative feedback or constructive criticism, let's say.
Right. Better term.
Yeah, and when I do receive that, which honestly doesn't come too often, but it does, I sort of refer back to my experiences with someone who's passed on now, the gentleman named Andy Gill,
Okay.
who was in the band Gang of Four.
Right.
Passed away last year. And I love that band. I've written about them more than any other band I've posted on the website. But I wasn't always favorable to what they produced. I skewered him and his band as much as I praised him. He always responded to what I had to say, by saying, I appreciate the fact you gave this thought.
Mm-hmm.
And you thought enough about it to express what you ultimately did.
Right.
So it wasn't maybe the rosiest review, but it was very well thought out.
Mm-hmm.
He always appreciated that, and I could have conversations about what I liked and didn't like about what he was doing. And it was never like, oh, well, who the hell are you? It was, oh, okay, well, I'm interested in what you have to say.
Right.
So I've tried to approach any kind of constructive criticism that way,
mm-hmm.
because he certainly didn't have to give me the criticism. So
right.
The least I can do is extend the same in return when somebody comes and says, I'm not really into this or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, honestly, I haven't received a lot of negative feedback about things, except that I think people wanted the 3M girls to get even more graphic. And I think, again, I'm not quite sure how to make it more graphic. Maybe a Scratch Smith edition. I mean, beyond that, I'm really not sure.
Yeah. You're going to have to make it into a mini-series of some sort to, play it out. Who would you have play Joel Gausten in a series?
Oh, my God. I don't know. Is there any rapidly aging bald drummers out there? I don't know. I'm not sure. I have to get that one some thought. I do know who would play some of the girls in the movie, though. I will say that.
There you go.
Victor will definitely do it. But I don't know. That's a good question. I'll be giving that some thought.
Yeah. Did you get any surprise people that came out and told you that they read the book?
No names mentioned, because I don't want to kind of go there.
Okay, that's fine.
because it's somebody I know in the industry, and it's somebody I don't want to kind of throw in there.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. I'm not looking for drum.
It was somebody who actually reached out to me and said, hey, is that book of yours still available? And I said, yeah, sure. What's your address? And he gave it to me and said, so how much is it? I said, I'm not going to charge you for it.
Right.
In the mail for you. And he's like, no, I totally want to buy it, support you. Please let me buy it. And would you mind if you signed it for me?
Oh wow.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, no problem. Well, you're listening to you since I was 10 years old. I think I can sign the book for you.
Right.
You want to buy it, So that was kind of cool. A lot of musician friends who I've interviewed over the years very kindly reached out and told me they got a copy and they really into it.
Cool.
When you put something out in the world, you don't know how people react. You also don't know who is going to react.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you get some interesting feedback, and that's what's nice about all this media that we have now. It may not be necessarily evident when you produce it, how wide-reaching it's going to be. We don't know who's ultimately going to see this podcast, for example.
Right.
People a year from now will spark an interest. And I still get emails from that little Misfit book I put out 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
People are really still into that. Some obscure, like in my mind, obscure band I did, 20 years ago. So you never quite know what's going to reach people. And that's why it's important to always create and to always produce things. Because the wider the net you have, inevitably the more people will be caught up in it.
Right.
But they're never going to be caught in the ways that you want them to, or what anticipate them to, because that's not your choice. You can have intention to create something. Oh, well, these people are going to like it, but it's not up to you. All you can do is produce the best thing you can and put it out in the world, and whoever catches it, catches it. And that's part of the wonder of doing it, is you never quite know who's going to understand where you're coming from.
Right.
Sometimes it'll be surprising to you.
Or even the least likely thing that you think that somebody would latch onto. One thing that maybe you think is an afterthought really strikes a nerve with someone, and they reach out to you because of that. There's I interviewed somebody a few months back who their lyrics are politically charged, but they wrote the lyrics like kind of center of the row, where they could be interpreted one way or the other. And when I asked them about it, they said, well, actually, once an album comes out, it's no longer mine, essentially what you're saying. It's left up to the listener's interpretation. And he said, even though I lean more towards this side of the aisle when I post online and whatnot, my music is left up to everyone to interpret the way that they want them to interpret the way that they want to. So I get exactly what you're saying. And to your point, I think with the way everything is set up nowadays, with social media, with having a website, with having music, and just different avenues to put content out there, it's exactly what you said. We're all just casting a net and seeing what we can pick up along the way, whether it's, again, someone finds out who you are through a book, or they, like you said, listen to an obscure band you were in 20 years ago, and all of a sudden they know who Joe Gausten is just out of the blue. Yesterday they didn't have a clue who you were, and now today they want to find out all about you. So it's why it's important to be able to put all the stuff out there so that people can find out who you are.
Absolutely. I think it's important and obvious to those people who do things like what you're doing and what I do. None of us will ever be rich doing any of this.
Right.
Ever. We can have as many Patreons as we want. It's never going to happen. So do it for the love of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, you may only reach a tenth of what you'd like to imagine you're reaching, but it'll have greater value to those, that 10%. than if you had 100%.
Yeah.
So it's about having more meaningful content and have it be meaningful for maybe fewer people than having something disposable by the masses. And I think that's the key to all of this stuff, is producing things that hit people in the gut, just not as many as maybe it could have been 25 years ago, whatever, when the model was so much different to reach people. I think that's so important. I think anybody who does podcasting or website, we do it because we love doing it.
Yeah.
And that's a legitimate passion, because I think the train has definitely left many years ago as far as anybody doing this for a career. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and the people that do it, I have this discussion with others all the time where I want to start a podcast up. I've had more than one musician. I sold all these albums in the 80s, and I'm coming back to the industry now, and I'm going to do my podcast. I bet all those people will buy whatever I'm doing. And I said, well, think of it this way: 1% of the people that followed you back then is your diehard audience. 1% of that 1% is who's going to be willing to spend money on you. And a lot of people don't realize, well, why can't I be Eddie Trunk, or why can't I be Chris Jericho? Or, there's these fakakta comparisons where you don't realize. And Adam Carolla came from MTV. He had, an audience on the radio in LA. So when he transitioned, or even a Joe Rogan, who's been in the press a lot lately, because of the money that he's made off of Spotify, you have this audience. He brought an audience from UFC, from his stand-up, from being on TV on Fear Factor, from being on, I forget what sitcom he was on. So all that transitioned to bringing that audience into his podcast, being able to cultivate that audience, but he had a built-in audience somewhere else. I'm not saying that podcasting isn't a great medium and it doesn't help, people like us get the word out there. But much to your point, I'm never going to get rich off of this. I've always spent more money investing into what I do than actually get money out of it. And that's why I always tell people that do follow me on Patreon or do follow what I do here, I appreciate every single one of them, because I realize that their time is valuable and they're deciding to spend time with me live on a Friday night or listening to my podcast some other day. So I'm grateful for anyone that wants to do it, that wants to keep up with what I'm doing. And if, I've got like 7 patrons right now, I'm thrilled that there are people that actually want to, throw some money my way to, interact and do a lot of the cool stuff that I do with trying to promote new music and different things through my Patreon platform. But I agree with what you're saying. It's a rant that I've had for years, and I've seen plenty of big names come and go. You look at I always use the example of Dee Snider. Dee Snider lasted 11 episodes of his podcast. It's hard work. You have to continue to do it, and you got to continue to put content out there, or your audience is gone. And like I said, someone like him, sure, he could make it happen. But you also have to make it entertaining for people and make sure that they keep coming back, because there are a lot of people that have names that have tried, but just don't have the ability to continue to do it, and the ability to, in some cases, talk about other things but themselves. So,
well, I think somebody who's new, let's say, who doesn't have a prior name in the marketplace. Just somebody who's new, who wants to do a podcast, who's a fan, who's in technology, or they want to publish a book, or whatever it may be.
Right.
The number one goal should be to produce passionate content and produce the content you can produce. That should be it. That should be your number one priority. Then you worry about building an audience. But you should be able to produce something that is of value to yourself and you believe in. Because I think if you do that first, your audience is going to come.
Yeah,
because,
I agree with you.
Just produce the right content for you that you believe in. You're going to have an audience. But to do anything, whether it's artwork or what have you, too solely based on the marketplace, there is no marketplace for this. There isn't. There is
Right.
no. Like I said, the Corollas and the Eddie Trons. Those people built their name in the '80s and the '90s. In the early 2000s before the bottom fell out. So they have something to trade on.
Mm-hmm.
I have a good friend who was in a pretty successful band about 20 years ago.
Okay.
And this person has done Patreon,
Right.
and has been able to help with financial issues and things during the pandemic, by producing very personal content for her patrons and stuff like that. But she has that name from from that era, So, but to come out fresh and do it like, hey, we're a garage band, check out our Patreon, fuck off. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are ways that I think you can supplement what you're doing, but definitely to think that you're just going to make a living off of it is just crazy. Sure, there are, people talk about, this influencer now has all these followers, right? But one thing is having all these followers on social media. The other thing is translating it into having people consistently give you money. And another example is, what's it called? 2 Minutes to Late Night, which is like a series that it's a comedian who, and his name escapes me. I wish I had it written down, but he is constantly doing covers with members of other bands. And a lot of the curiosity is, well, you're bringing in someone from Mastodon, you're bringing in someone from Baroness, you're bringing in fans from these different bands. And the ultimate goal is, again, his net is to catch people and bring them into what he's doing. But he's also putting stuff out several times a week. It's not just like, oh, well, I'm going to drop a little, hey, how are you, like once a month, and expect people to just hang out and just, give you $20. It just doesn't happen.
Well, that guy.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
No, I was going to say, you have to give people something, something that they find of value, not just, hey, not everyone is a super huge band that can like crap on a newspaper and sell it and make millions off of it. So.
Yeah, I like that guy's channel. I watch it for that very reason. Who's it going to be this time?
Yeah.
He had Max Weinberg doing everything. That was great. So for me, it's like, well, what's it going to be now? So he kind of happened upon this very cool concept right now during the pandemic, where logistically it makes sense to have all these different people,
right?
Because there's people something to do, and it's become popular enough so the participants get something out of it. I've heard of new bands I was unfamiliar with by watching that guy's channel. Like who's that band? Because he lists all the bands that are represented. It's like, well, who the hell is that? Then I'll go find those records, and that's brilliant. That's great.
Right.
But as an overall statement, if people look at what happened 20 years ago with file sharing and how that was the beginning of the end. Rob Zombie right now, this past week, I think topped the album sales chart of Billboard, #1 with 12,000 records sold.
Right.
My punk band from the 90s sold 40,000.
Right. It's so different. Yeah. It's
so, but I mean, it's a liberating feeling too, because then that marketplace factor isn't relevant, or not as relevant as it once was. So people can do things without having to chase something. And it just comes down to what they want to do, what they want to communicate, and how they want to communicate it. So it's almost a blessing in a sense, where there isn't that pressure to be, I have to get a record deal. What does that even mean in 2021?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's been very liberating in that respect. And technology has enabled this conversation to happen. Where
absolutely.
Or that guy who does those, the Midnight Fellow who does all those videos. It's like you can coordinate with people over the world to make music. I mean, that to me is far more exciting than trying to like follow the charts,
Right.
which obviously are irrelevant. If Rob Zombie, bless him, can sell 12,000 records in 1 week, there were bands in the 90s who lost their tour support for selling 40,000 copies in the first week of release. I know these people.
Right.
You know? So the model, and what's crazy to me is the music industry still functions with the same barometers they were using 25 years ago.
Right.
To chart success. You know, then you have these poor bastards in these bands who are posting things like, I had 2 million streams on Spotify, so?
Right.
You know? So the barometers are really just out of whack, you know? But again, it goes back to Linkin Park having 1 billion streams or whatever it is on their YouTube and the amount of dollars in their pocket. There's a very, very wide gap there. You can have 1 million streams on their Spotify, enjoy your McMuffin the next day. You know, I mean, so the financial incentive to do this is almost non-existent. So you really have to just focus on what you should have been focusing on all along, which is creating something of value to share with people.
Yeah.
I think it's a positive in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone who you've interviewed and have had a relationship with over the years is Bill Ward. Were you surprised that he came out recently and mentioned that he didn't feel that he was no longer up to doing a tour with Sabbath? I mean, I know it was a big headline, but I think at the end of the day, you have to look at, you know, Bill's age and, you know, and not only Bill, but all of Sabbath. I mean, how many of them could tour nowadays what they did 10 years ago? I don't think any of them could.
I think the time for bands that became massively successful in the 70s to tour regularly again, I think that ship has sailed.
Right.
Just because of human biology.
Right.
You know, there's some guys who can do it. I just talked to Rick Lee from 10 Years After. Those guys are still doing what they can do. But they're also not playing at the massive scale that a Sabbath would play at.
Right.
Bill is in his early 70s now. He's had, just in the last few years, some health issues, as one commonly does at that age. Drumming is an incredibly physical job.
Yes.
Not to take anything away from Ozzy, but of the two, Bill has a more physically demanding job than Ozzy does, for example. But you know, like these guys, you know, it's almost like how much longer will any of these people be around? You know, Steven Tyler just turned 73 today, I believe.
Right.
You know, there's always these people hammering on about, can I get Ace and Peter back in Kiss? Can I get Ace and Peter back in Kiss?
Yeah.
These are old men, you know, who made their mark before I was born, and I'm going to be 44 this year. You know, sometimes you just have to realize the records are going to be enough.
Yeah,
it should be enough. As far as Bill specifically, last time I saw him was in 2018.
Okay.
And we met up after he had given a book reading because he had published his book of poetry at that time and artwork and stuff. And he had given a reading out in Los Angeles, and he had mentioned then he had had some. You know, more recent health matters that were prohibiting the use of his double kick, for example.
Right.
You know, these things happen. It doesn't take away from what he's done in the past. You know.
Absolutely.
You know, again, you know, human life has a sell-by date, so these bands are going to as well. You know, and we're even seeing that with a lot of the '80s bands who are still touring, who are now in their 50s and.
Right.
You know, sometimes the fans had to give up the dream. Personally, I would have loved to have seen the original Sabbath end on that farewell tour. No disrespect to Tommy, who did the drum roll for that tour. He's a fantastic player. But I think that was kind of the last chance. You know, while they're all still alive, which is wonderful. You know, sometimes people have earned the right just to kind of put their feet up too. You know.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, people retire if they work at a bank when
Hmm.
they're in their 60s. Why do we expect our rock stars to go until they drop?
Right. And
That's not,
the
that's not how
misconception
I see
too, you brought up Ace and Peter. People think that they're getting Peter from 77, which was already, you know, um, 40 some odd years ago. As you're saying, the body deteriorates, and not everyone is genetically gifted to be able to keep up with a lot of what they were doing back then. I don't understand why more people don't do what the Bee Gees did. The Bee Gees, towards the end of their career, did 5 shows a year, one per continent, and they charged a hefty bill. They charged a lot of money, but it was your only chance you were going to see them. You wanted to see them. This is your only shot. So they'd play a stadium on 5 biggest continents, and then they'd charge like $100-200 a pop, and that was it. So they could prepare for those 5 shows, have enough rest in between, so they would be, on the top of their game for what they could at that time, and that was it. And then even further on down the line, they just would do one show in Australia, do a pay-per-view to the rest of the world, and that was it. Kiss is my favorite band, but if they were to do 5-10 shows a year, you'd get a much better performance in my opinion, because you're not going out and just running the machine into the ground, basically, because again, it's guys in their 70s running around with the boots and the makeup and the outfits, plus the instruments that aren't always a Les Paul isn't exactly light. So you add all those things together. I think that there are smarter ways of doing what they're doing and making, maybe not as much money, but close to, what they would be making it if they were playing, 300, 250 shows a year.
Mm. It'll be interesting to see once this pandemic is finally over. How many of the classic artists will be returning to the road?
Yeah.
I would suspect a pretty large number of them are already done.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
See certain bands before last year, we're not going to see them now.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's too much time. 18 months is an extraordinarily long period of time
Mm-hmm.
for someone in their 70s who isn't out there doing the touring and the buses and the. It doesn't matter if you're touring, staying at 5-star hotels, the greatest bus in the world, private, masseurs, the whole thing. That
Right.
doesn't matter. If you're of a certain age and you're living in a vehicle for 18 months or however long it's going to be, it's going to wear on you. And
Yeah.
I think there are plenty of musicians, not just Bill, but I think a lot of people we grew up on will just not come back to the stage at this point.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
Yeah, just and again, no reason to fault these people,
Mm-hmm.
But there are some people like Barry Manilow, for example, of whom I'm a fan. I saw him in Vegas a couple of years ago, and he's 76 at the time.
Okay.
And he did Vegas residency where he was killing it every night, and he was fantastic. Very physical show, very into it, very up there.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people who can do it. But the vast majority, I think the classic rock wave of touring acts, I think it's coming to an end. And then we're going to start seeing the new classic rock, which will be the late 80s into 90s stuff. Our generation's probably going to be the classic rock guys.
Yeah. Yeah, we will see. Someone who's no longer with us is Lee Kerslake, and kind of, I guess about a year before he passed away, I don't know if he made amends with Ozzy, or at least Ozzy made a gesture when he presented him with the album plaques that he lost, and he wrote a letter to him, and I don't know if anything went beyond that. Someone that you've been in contact with, if I'm not mistaken, is Bob Daisley. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there will come a point in time where Bob and Ozzy kind of cross that bridge, or do you think that ship has sailed a long time ago?
Well, that's another example. Bob is from my understanding, from my
Hmm.
conversations with Bob, he is retired from touring.
Right.
I know he's been working on the project for at least a couple of years,
Right.
like a surf kind of project with a friend of his. Um, but again, that's another example. Bob's in his 70s, Ozzy's 849. It's like, where's it going to go? you know.
Yeah.
And I can only speak to what I published online and written
Right.
about as far as the Ozzy Bob thing. So I don't really know how much resolution has been made to some of those issues. I mean, Bob
Right.
would be a wonderful guy to have on your show if you haven't already.
Yeah, I've tried many times.
And as far as Lee, I didn't know Lee terribly well. I was in touch with him for a bit through
Right.
Bob, because I had done a feature on my website about the Over the Mountain drum intro.
Right.
Which it kind of turned into a little bit of a controversy because Frankie Banali, who I also knew,
Yeah.
he had made some claims that he came up with that intro when he was jamming with Ozzy, early on, like well before, and Lee had a problem with that. So all I did was I contacted Lee, I contacted Frankie, and Bob Daisley, who has kept diaries forever.
Right.
He kind of came on and he kind of gave me dates to kind of back up, what Lee was saying, and
Right.
I don't think it was for me to definitively say who did it and who didn't as far as that drum beat. All I did was kind of put all the sides together.
Right.
But I found Lee to be a very nice guy, very funny guy, somewhat abrasive, but a cool guy. And we exchanged emails more than we spoke on the phone. I did talk to him, and he was a good guy. And I know he was working on his solo album last time I talked to him.
Right.
That album has just come out within the last month, called 11 Teen, which is a beautiful record. I don't know if you've heard it yet.
I haven't heard it yet. I knew it was coming out, but I didn't know that it was already out, so I'll have to check it out, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's out on Cherry Red Records.
Oh, okay.
But it's a beautiful album. Beautiful album. I'm going to be writing about it hopefully soon on the website. Just a gorgeous record. And it's so cool that he got to the finish line, because I wasn't sure where he was with that. Because he was telling me about that way back in 2017.
Right.
And then he was already sick at that point. So. But that's another example. Bob's in his 70s. It's like, how much longer are they going to be able to do this?
Yes.
It would be cool if they did a song together. And Ozzy brought back Bob to write. Because I think Ozzy's solo career has definitely suffered as a result of not having Bob there.
Right.
That would be cool just from a fan perspective. Will it happen? You and I both know there's a third party involved in that. So.
Well, given I don't want to bring that third party up, but given current events, who knows? Although she's been known to come back from other controversies before, I think the Arden genes are bulletproof in a lot of situations where the rest of us would already have a chalk line around us. So I don't know. We'll see. I would love, and I think Ozzy and Sharon have been smart to surround him with a lot of great musicians over the years. I think, if he does decide that he's going to hang it up, I think they should try to do something where they kind of corral all of the people that have had a big influence on his albums over the years. I know some of them are gone already, but it would just be cool to hear another track with Bob, another track with Jake, another track with Tommy Aldridge. These are all guys that, that's true.
There are guys waiting to get paid from the albums.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It all comes down to that. So you're right. Speaking of getting paid, did you ever expect in your wildest dreams when you were jamming with this band up in Vernon, called the Misfits, that they would be selling out the Garden?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was inevitable what happened.
Okay.
I think the reasons for it taking place when it did, are interesting, and perhaps a different podcast entirely. But
Sure.
I mean, it's really the Misfits and Minor Threat who are the holdovers for the reunion train.
Right.
Black Flag did it. It's
Mhm.
debatable whether or not it's really Black Flag.
Right.
A band called Black Flag featuring Greg Ginn put out a new album for it.
Mhm.
The Minor Threat is still not doing it. And there's something kind of cool about that, I think.
Right.
But with the Misfits, I mean, it was always kind of in the background, like that could be pulled out if necessary. Like that could be
Right.
And I've thought a lot about it because I've been to a lot of those reunion shows, and it's just so nice to see those guys have that moment and
Right.
have their victory lap as a band. And a lot of people say, well, they did it because they're successful because Danzig is back, and that's true to a very large degree.
Mhm.
Having Glenn, even though it's not really the Glenn that we had in the '90s, it's kind of the obviously much older Glenn, which is what we're talking about. So it's not quite the same anymore, but they still put on a great show, and but really, I think the key to that reunion being successful really is Jerry Only.
Mhm.
Because he was out there for 25 years working that catalog.
Right.
By him being on the road for 25 years, he kept all those records out there in the marketplace and kept the name out there, albeit a very different version of the band. But the band nonetheless, he was working that brand. He was keeping that catalog alive. And I have talked to some people who are not in the Misfits anymore. No names mentioned, but I have heard there are people who are quite happy that they're doing the reunion tours, because that means they can sit back and get royalties from the records they were on, so, without having to do the work, So that was really Jerry's doing, I think, making that so successful. So Glenn could kind of come back in and then bang, go for the victory lap. But did I think it would happen? Yeah, I figured eventually it would. I think both of those parties would reach a point where they really had gone as far as they could go as performers, and it was inevitable that because they each side had that as kind of the nuclear option, so to speak, to do it. And if there's an opportunity to be reaching your retirement age and to have that be your retirement, I mean, we would all take advantage of that. I'm just very happy it happened. It's a big business to keep that band moving, and there's a lot of moving parts in that operation. But it's cool that those moving parts were addressed to the point where they could all go on stage and do it and put on a really good show. And the last time I saw them was at Madison Square Garden, and you can imagine being the Jersey kid yourself. Go to the Guard and see your boys up there.
Yeah.
It was great. It was fantastic. I went with a girl I've known since I was 10 years old.
Right.
And we both grew up with these guys and knew them, back when we were teenagers. We knew Jerry and Gloria.
Right.
So it was fantastic to be there and see, just see them do that, but it really always was a part of me that knew there would be an inevitability while they were all still alive, and that's something else too. A lot of these guys miss their opportunity because there's usually somebody missing from the equation.
Right.
But did you go to any of those shows? Did you see those shows with Glenn?
I didn't. I haven't been stateside in 11 years now. So I mean they haven't done any shows here in Europe. And that was my next question. I don't know if you foresee post-COVID if you think they'll continue on. There have been all these rumors that Garden show or those shows that they played around that time that was pretty much end of the road. But I know a lot of people are clamoring to see them over here in Europe. But again, much to everything else we've been talking about, they honestly owe nothing to anybody. It's a great way for them to go out, and they should be masters of what they do with that name. And I think what you said is very important. For the longest time, people didn't know if this band was coming back. So Jerry's version of the band, whether it's the Resurrection lineup or the version that he had with Descadena and so on and so forth, for a lot of people, that was the closest that they felt they were going to get to see the Misfits. So to them, it was a party. It was something to go see because they loved the songs and they knew they were going to have a tremendous time at one of their shows. And someone like myself who likes pretty much every iteration of the band, to me, I think it's great that he was able to do that and that they were able to bring things back full circle. Obviously, with this lineup getting back together again, I think if there was ever any chance of the Resurrection lineup ever getting back together again, after this, I personally don't see it, but you've got more of a ear to the ground in this neck of the woods, so and you're shaking your head no.
I'm not talking to Jerry and Doyle every day, so right. I don't know what the latest news might be. But here's my guess. Here's my guess on that. I think a Graves era reunion would be fantastic personally, because that's my era, because I was in the room when the guys were writing those songs.
Right.
So I'd love to see those guys work together again. And I could say, well, they don't get along. Well, the other bunch made it work. So,
right.
But here's the problem: because the Misfits returned with the original, quote unquote, original incarnation,
right,
that obviously bumped them up tremendously in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
To give you a parallel example of where I'm going with this, if you consider Black Sabbath in 1995, I think it was,
right,
were on IRS Records. They had just done that Forbidden album. I think Ron Donnelly was touring with them at the time. A totally different band.
Mm-hmm.
We were a theater act at most.
Right.
When it was the Iommi Sabbath. During all those incarnations, post Dio, well, maybe post Gillen, it was all kind of theater level.
Right.
Ozzy comes. Sabbath becomes massive again in 97, 98. Ozzy does the Osbourne TV show, which further elevates the brand in the market. He tours with Sabbath. Ozzy's running Sabbath. Promoters, the band can charge more. The promoters can pay more. Ticket prices go up. Heaven and Hell comes out after the Sabbath thing, with Dio rejoining the band, who was a theater headliner at that point.
Right.
People forget that about Dio. Dio was not filling out stadiums when they did Heaven and Hell. He was filling out 2,000 seaters. Not dissing the guy, but that's what he was doing. He was doing 2,000 seaters, 3,000 seaters with the Dio band. If they were to bring Dio in the band and call it Black Sabbath, that would tank the previous 10 years of work they all put in to build up the Sabbath name in the marketplace. So it's the same thing with the Misfits. The Misfits now are a massive participant in the marketplace. They sold out MSG.
Right.
The fucking Graves Channel lineup can't sell out MSG. So why would they attach that brand name to that band?
Right.
So I don't think just from a business standpoint, it makes no sense. I could see something like where they had it a few years ago. I think they're playing in Sayreville. And Danzig was headlining, and Gorgeous Frankenstein, which was Doyle and Chud's band at the time, opened.
Yeah.
And they brought up Graves. They did like a medley of songs from.
Yeah.
Something like that could happen again. If they actually go with the Misfits of that lineup, no. Why would they do that? It would trash their market value.
Yeah. So similar to Heaven and Hell, it'd make more sense for them to go out as like Famous Monsters or something like that. That is a play on one of the album titles from that era. But yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. A lot of people don't understand that once a band transitions over to a brand name, it's difficult, or once you're there, you want to maintain it. And you have a lot of people around you that say, well, your moves are X, Y, and Z. This will maintain you. This may make you more money, but this will, cut your income in half. So, a lot of this stuff isn't done just due to happenstance. A lot of people ask, with like Stone Temple Pilots or Alice in Chains, well, why do they still use the name? Well, because Jerry Cantrell put out 2 fabulous kick-ass solo albums that no one bought. And then he came back with the Alice in Chains name and continued to put out music that was as comparable as his solo work. And those albums sold while his name didn't sell. So why would you go back? And again, I don't think it's anyone's business to say, well, you need to retire the name. No, I work the name. I own the name. Why should these people give up and decide to start painting houses just because some dude on the internet says?
It's like that Misfits album, that Project 1950.
Right.
Where they have those 50s covers, which I like more now than I did back then. I would be very fond of that record. And the whole Jerry only version of the band with him singing.
Right.
But I was there's some thread on Facebook. There's a Misfits podcast, and the guy was asking, why didn't Jerry just put out as Jerry Only and Friends doing Project 1950?
Right.
Because he owns the name to the name Misfits. Of course, he put it on anything he can. He owns it. He's able to use it.
So give me a break. That's ridiculous. Top 4 selling T-shirts of all time: Misfits, Ramones, Led Zeppelin, and Motorhead.
Right.
Okay. Right now, I mean, out of all of those, you tell me that if Mickey D and Phil Campbell could somehow use the Motorhead name in some capacity, that they wouldn't use it. But I'm sure due to legal reasons and whatnot, they can't. Or maybe they already get a cut out of what was left behind, so there is no need for that. But if you have a money-making machine, which was, again, you said a podcast all onto itself, there are so many rumors and things about how much money they made off of merch over the years, and off of the Crimson Ghost and so on and so forth. Whether you like their music or not, they were still making a lot of money due to the correct marketing that they continued to do with the band. So, as much as people say, oh, well, it's not cool to wear your own merch, or it's not cool to do this or to do that, at the end of the day, if you can make a living off of it, again, who cares what some dude in their basement is saying?
Here's another example, which I think even drives the point home, maybe a little bit further than what we're talking about. Look at what's going on right now with Quiet Riot.
Right.
That's a prime example. I mean, it could be argued that when Metal Health came out, there weren't any original members in Quiet Riot. Okay, so that band has always had a very influx, well, except for Kevin DuBrow, of course, but when they came out and did that Quiet Riot 3 album in the late 80s, Kevin was so they've always had this
fluctuating lineup. Yeah. Right.
Frankie clearly had rights to the name. He brought it back. Sadly, he's passed on, and love to Frankie, the memory of Frankie Benally, a wonderful guy. But now they've got Johnny Kelly playing drums, a totally different band. But, Frankie's Frankie was a father, he was a partner. I'm sure, he wanted to do what he had to do for those around him.
Right.
So arrangements were made. And the average person who's going to go to a casino and see a band play free, like in Sun in Connecticut, they have that list where all these guys end up playing. The average person who's there with their wife and kids on like a Sunday afternoon, oh, Quiet Riot's playing. I love that song, from 1980 whatever. I'm going to go for free and check out Quiet Riot,
Yeah.
Well, they care about. They don't care if Johnny Kelly's playing drums. What the fuck do they care?
Yeah.
They want to hear those songs they hear on the radio when they're at the beach in the 80s,
Yeah.
That's what people are trading on in the music industry. That's their trade. They're not trading on who's playing bass on this album on side 3 of the double live record, or was it really this guy playing tambourine and shaking the sugar packets? No.
Yeah.
You and I care about that. We care about that shit. But
the
average person doesn't. And there are more of them than there are of us.
Absolutely.
So I think it makes perfect sense. I look forward to seeing that incarnation of Quiet Riot, to hear all those great songs as a fan of them as an entity.
Yeah.
That's the purest example. There's nobody left.
Right.
You could argue Chuck Wright has been around for a while, but you got Jizzy Pearl singing and Johnny Kelly on drums. I mean, is that Quiet Riot? Well, it is today, and it's cool that there's a Quiet Riot out there. So I'm going to go buy my ticket and go to the show.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we guys keep doing that.
The casual fan, which is the difference between an album back in the day going, gold to platinum. The casual fan doesn't give a damn about who's in the band, as you're saying. It's just music nerds like us that, hey, Chuck Wright actually played on the track Metal Health and on another track off of Metal Health, so he has every right to be in the band, type of a deal. Going back to Kiss, there are a lot of people that don't give a shit about Ace and Peter because all they're seeing is the makeup. I know that a lot of diehards are going to shit on me for that, but the image is what sells them on the show, and they're there to see a show. They're not there to say, oh no, he didn't, the fourth bar of the solo during shouted out loud, he played a hammer-on instead of pinching off the note like Ace used to do it. That's less than 1% of the people that are at the show.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why there's this industry, with the Fog Hats and all these bands, even 10 years after are out there putting out records and playing. And, it's one guy, she's two guys, but, it's not the classic bands anymore.
Right.
But, if somebody wants to have some nostalgia or just a fun night out, because we're all, I'm a 90s kid, which means I'm approaching middle age. Actually, I've kind of hit middle age already. So we're going to be seeing all the Hoobastanks and all,
right.
all these all these mid 90s bands playing or whatever that are going to have like the bass player. That's going to be what's coming next. We're going to have all these bands. I struggle to find names. I wasn't really into like the commercial stuff back then, but you get my point. It's like that band. We're going to have those guys coming around. And, Orgy is going to be playing the State Fair. With like the guitars from the first album. It's just inevitable. And you know what? If you can go out there and tour and make money as a musician in 2021, call yourself anything you want. If you can get away with it, if you've got the paperwork that says you can do it, do it. And play until you've reached that point, like Bill and Ozzy and those guys who just can't do it anymore. But in the time, go for it, because there's so many of us who haven't been able to get to that point. So
the other thing too is, we've seen Motown acts do it for years. I remember, growing up in Morris County in Dover, we had our fireworks every year, and we had like almost every year was a different person who had been in the Supremes was there to kind of warm up the fireworks. Before the fireworks went up, they had someone different who had been in the Supremes for like 2 months, and or the great grandchild of the Temptations, and it's so on and so forth, and the Temptations, and it's like, okay, well, it's one of like 3 touring acts that's going out there using this name because they each legally, own it, and they can play shows in this area under that moniker. So, it was only a matter of time till it happened in, rock music. So I'm not surprised.
Well, there's no rule book for punk. There's no rule book for metal because
Right.
those genres are kind of reaching middle age. Well, in terms of metal, it's surpassed middle age.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no like, Bill Haley and his Comets, became
Right.
the Comets, and they were playing, and
Yeah.
Oz and all the replacement people. Our genres are now reaching that age.
Yeah.
So it is very interesting to see how that kind of plays in. How there's only like one guy in the punk band.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing like the moldy oldies kind of tour, but it's our generation now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
I think it's great. I saw the Temptations during that time you were mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them. I can't remember. There's that big theater in Morristown.
I think it's just it used to be called the Morristown Community Theater, but I think they changed it. I think it's like an NJ Pack now. I forget.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I saw the Temptations there 20 years ago on Valentine's Day with my then girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the least significant member of the Temptations was the original one left. He wasn't the ooh guy. He wasn't
Right.
the star. He was the ooh guy in the background.
Yeah.
Him and like kids, guys who were like half his age.
Yeah.
But they were extraordinary. It was the best Valentine's Day experience. And the songs were great. They sounded great. Everybody knew those songs. And I and everyone else left with a smile on their face. So what's the harm in this, guys? It's just music. I try to tell people that. It's music and entertainment. This is the entertainment business. When you go see Barnum and Bailey Circus, do you care if it's the original Fire Eater or not?
Right.
Did they replace the elephant from the last time you saw it? You kind of have to put it in those terms as well.
Yeah. No, I hear you. As long as you're entertained, I mean, I think that's what matters. Because at the end of the day, I mean, if you really want to analyze it, it's similar to when people start to complain again, whether someone has a name or not, or whether, a band is fractioned and you take someone's side or whatnot. At the end of the day, you really don't have a horse in the race. It's up to them in their relationships and different things. And if someone is coming around, and again, is coming around as the Temptations, Rob in the chat is saying that he saw the Temptations, Four Tops, and the OJs in the 80s. I have to think that, how many original members were there outside of, the ooh guy, as you're saying, So there you go. The Mayo Performing Arts Center in Morristown. Yeah, I knew someone would chime in and correct me on that one. You've been rumoring at least 2 projects over the course of the last few years. I'm not saying that you need to divulge anything, but are we closer to finding out about any of these projects?
The musical projects?
Yes, musical projects.
One I can talk about, one I can't yet. But the first one, I've been working on it, or we've been working on it on and off for almost 4 years now.
Okay.
It's going to be a single.
Okay.
That we've all agreed will be a charity single for dog rescue.
Okay.
And I wanted to do a charity single for dog rescue because it's just as a principle, it's a cause very close to my heart. And that is an unnamed project, and it started with myself and the saxophonist from the band Pigface I've been a part of. And it kind of grew to include other members of Pigface, as well as some friends who heard about it and asked if they could be a part of it. So it's either a 12-member or a 13-member band.
Okay.
I don't know. They don't have the full list in front of me, but it's around 12 or 13 people. And it's 4 drummers, 3 bass players, guitar, sax, keys, percussion. It's all over the place. It's all being done with people around the world.
Cool.
As far as the members of the band, Ted Parsons, who used to be in Prong
Right. Mm-hmm.
and Swans, he's one of the drummers with myself and Martin King from Test Department, who now is a
Mm-hmm.
group called Dog Tablet.
Right.
And Greta Brinkman, who used to be in L7 and the Nuns, and played with Joan County and Pink Pig. She's one of the bass players.
Okay.
And Troy Gregory, who used to be in Flotsam and Jetsam and Prong, doing a remix. So I might not be correct, but I'm pretty damn sure that when this song comes out, it's the first time that Ted Parsons and Troy Gregory have been on a song together in 30 years.
Yeah. Okay.
We were on the Prove You Wrong record with Prong back in the day. So we're waiting for one final person to put her contributions down on the song.
Okay.
And they're going to do the main track, which you'll have to hear it. It's crazy. And then we've got 2 separate remixes right now.
Oh, okay.
It's being remixed by Martin King and this guy Roberto Suave, who was in a bunch of bands. The Associates, he was in The Cure for a bit in the 90s.
Okay.
Bass. So it'll be a cool EP, and we don't have a name for that yet, but we're one person away from finishing it, and then we have to mix it and all that. So I'm hoping that will be out at the end of the year. The second project is not a 12-person band. It's probably going to be a quartet or a quintet.
Okay.
And it's with a couple of the same people, but some other people who I can't announce yet.
Okay.
But we're going to be, because it's going to be really cool when it's done.
Okay.
I thought to myself, who would be of my musician base? Who would be the people who I really want to do something with if I had the opportunity to kind of pick and choose, like Desert Island? Make it just like a band, not like a project where there's 12 different people.
Right.
But make it a streamlined thing. And who would I have produce it if I had the choice? And all that's kind of happening.
Oh, wow.
A lot of yeses being thrown my way, and a lot of whenever you're ready, let's do it thrown my way.
Oh, cool.
So we have to wait for the pandemic to get a little bit eased up. But once everybody involved is vaccinated and comfortable touring, there will be a congregation in the Midwest with some very, very, very cool people. I'll tell you off the air what it is, but I just can't say it yet because I think when I do, it's going to be people are going to be reporting on it and stuff. I'd rather have something tangible to show people because it could be probably a year or more until it's actually finished. But yeah, this is a great example of the fact that we can't be connected. We can still make music, and technology's enabled files to be shared, and just wonderful people. And I've been very fortunate in that with all the people I've worked with, I have this fantastic well of musicians who are also dear friends, and I can reach out to them in various combinations and say, hey, let's do a thing, and there'll be a thing. So I'm really excited about both of them. The second one that I can't get into too much, I mean, that's just like, forget it. I mean, that's going to be, I could probably stop playing after that. I'm not going to talk to it. This is as far as it's going to go.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Last, before we wrap things up here, where do you want people to pick up your books? I know the other day you posted something about there being some sort of like price gouging for some of the books that you've released, and you wanted people to go to a specific site. Is it Lulu that you want people to go to, or where do you want to point people to pick up your material?
Well, first of all, I would encourage people to go to whatever bookseller, online or otherwise, they're most comfortable using.
Okay.
So my price point is irrelevant. Whatever's easiest for you,
okay,
you do that. Whether it be Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If it does make a difference for anyone, going to lulu.com, LULU.com, I get the most out of every sale that way. But by all means, use whatever method is easiest for you. I would encourage you to keep in mind that nothing I've ever published has been above the $25 price point.
Right.
That's for a hardcover book. The 3 a.m. Girls should only be $7. plus whatever shipping option you choose.
Right.
It should only be $7. If it's higher than that, I would be suspicious of where you're getting it from.
Okay.
And I would keep that in mind. Like I said, the most expensive book I have for sale is $25. Another one is $9, and 3AM Girls is $7. So keep that in mind, guys. If you see the price is a little bit higher than that, find another seller, because I would certainly not charge that kind of money for what I put out. I don't believe in that shit. But yeah, Wulu is probably the easiest as far as taking care of me. But by all means, please use whatever site. Go to Amazon. Just like I said, just be very cautious of the price point you're looking at. If it's higher than $25, it ain't coming from me. So I would just add that.
And if people want to keep up with what you have going on, whether it's any of the articles that you post or any books in the future or any music reviews or anything, where do you want them to go?
They can go to my website, joelgausten.com. My first name is Joel. Last name is Gaus, like Sam, TEN like nurse.com. And there'll be a lot of content coming to the website in April.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I love having you back. Let's make it not 10 years the next time.
Absolutely. Really nice seeing you again. I'm glad we're able to do this. And I do follow what you do, and it's always a pleasure connecting. And I hope that continues for a long time to come. And like you said, let's not wait another 10 years. When the music starts coming out, we'll maybe reconnect and chat again. Yeah.
Awesome. I would love to do that. And like I said, would love to help promote what you have going on. So it's always fun. We've talked quite a bit offline, through Facebook and whatnot. And it's always fun to talk to you and get and see like different things that you post about. And, I don't comment on everything, but, a lot of times, less is more. So, it's one of those things where I like reaching out to you when I see something that really grabs my attention. And then the other day when you reached out to me, I was like, perfect opportunity to ask Joel to come on. So it was, I'm glad that you did. So
well, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who's been in the chat as well. Thank you for checking this out and listening to me blabber on for an hour. I write for a reason, because I'm not very good at this. So I appreciate you sticking in and checking this out. Thank you.
Well, most of everyone that's in the chat here is a diehard that comes back week after week, and I think that they all at this point know that that I just like going after good conversations, and I think most of them enjoy what people I bring on, because it doesn't always have to be about the glitz and the glamour. It can be just two guys just shooting the shit about music or different aspects of music or entertainment. So I hope everyone enjoyed this, and again, I really enjoyed being able to catch up with you tonight.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekends to come, and we'll do this again soon. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Joel. Thank you very much.
Take care. Cheers.
All right. Bye. There you go. That was my interview there with Joel Gausten. Again, Jersey guy. Ended up at 17 playing for the Misfits. So when you think about the Michael Graves lineup in the mid-90s, while they were trying out singers, the drummer, Dr. Chud, was the guy producing the singers. So Joel, a 17-year-old kid who lived in the neighborhood, who happened to be a drummer as well, was drafted into the ranks of the band by Jerry Olney and by Doyle. So he's got such a great storied, history with music. He's played with the Undead. He's played with Electric Frankenstein. A lot of different horror punk bands. He's played with Pigface, and he's played in a lot of different projects. And he's a cool guy. And it's funny because he he posted something not too long ago because he's interviewed Michael Sweet a few times over the years. And Michael Sweet and him are kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to religion. And what I love about Joel is that he's very respectful towards people, whether, their ideology is the same or not. At the end of the day, it's like being hired on to be a musician in a band. If you're asked to play a certain part, you can't always say, oh, well, I'm going to play it this other way because this is what I do. Well, no, be respectful to those around you and those that are trying to get this done. I don't know. Maybe using the incorrect analogy, but I like the way that he approaches things. It's always fun to talk to him. And like I said, I want to have him back again. And you guys that are here week after week, I've had Mr. Brad Dahl, who's in the chat, saving the world out there in Utah. I have Rob from the Rock and Roll podcast. I have my cousin Jose up there in Connecticut. Thank you for stepping in and mentioning the thing in Morristown, the theater, because that's changed names several times. Jeremy Weltman, of course, in the UK. And I want to send a shout out to my other patrons who are out there who will more than likely listen to this at a later date. We have Mr. Mike Jones, we have Steve Hoker, we have Mr. Mark Striegel, and we have another family member, the heavy metal dentist, Mr. Gabriel Ruiz. So there you go. Guys, as usual, I appreciate your time. I said it before during the show. I appreciate anyone who checks this out, whether it's live, whether it's the replay. It means the world to me that 11 years later, people still give a crap about what shows I put together. And I hope you guys enjoyed this chat with Joel, and there will be more similar. Brad says, let me bring this up on the big screen. Does it come up now? Yeah, so this is new. Okay. You just made Shelly laugh as I am sending someone into the hospital. It's not funny, but you have to laugh or you will go crazy. Absolutely. Comedy helps a lot. Especially, I can't even imagine. Humanity's supposed to be the smartest animal. Sometimes you got to question that. So that's that. Anyway, guys, we will be back next week. Don't know if there will be a midweek episode or not. That may be something that I start to do from time to time. We'll see. And depending on what opportunities come my way, because a lot of people, for some reason, haven't been all that flexible for joining me Friday nights. So if you're on Patreon, you'll know exactly what I mean. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Anyway, thank you guys for checking in. Let me get the this going. That's it, man. I truly believe that you guys are great, listening week after week. You guys do deserve a round of applause. And hope all you guys have a great weekend. And we'll see you next time right here on the Signals from Mars live stream, brought to you by the Mars Attacks podcast. We will see you next week.